and encouragement of public comment during our meetings. We will be accepting public comments based on using the hand raise feature, and I trust you all know what that means. You can raise your hand at any time and we will recognize you as we get to the public participation portion of the agenda for each case. Planner Newberry will be moderating the Zoom meeting and will be asked to provide names of those individuals that wish to speak, again, as hands are raised. Okay, so I would like to call the meeting of the City of Wildwood Board of Adjustment to order. The board members present today are Deborah Coleman, board member, Andrew Bolazina, alternate, Bob Nandor, alternate, and myself, Arnie Sprunger, board member and acting chair. The Department of Planning staff present tonight is Joe Vunich, Director of Planning, Kathy Arnett, Assistant Director of Planning, and Travis Newberry, the planner. City Attorney John Young and Court Reporter Courtney Tallman are also present. Thank you all for being here. First, I offer into the record the affidavit of publication pertaining to today's meeting, September 17th, 2020, and take official notice of the zoning ordinance of City of Wildwood. Thank you, Joe, including Chapter 400, Article 2, authorizing and establishing the Board of Adjustments, powers, and duties. Now, let me explain the hearing procedure. Please be aware the information I'm about to describe is also provided on the Board of Adjustment public hearing procedure handout, which was available online prior and up to tonight's meeting. This is an informal type of hearing. However, the meeting's proceedings will be recorded by a reporter for future transcription if needed. The petitions are called in the order listed in the agenda. As a petition is called, I will ask a Department of Planning staff member to read each request into the record. Thereafter, the Department of Planning will have opening remarks and a brief slide presentation. Then the petitioner or their representative will be asked to state their name and address, be sworn in by the court reporter, and make a brief presentation to the board explaining the nature of the requested variance and the hardship necessitating it. The board will only consider the nature and condition of the property and whether these factors mandate a variance in order to allow for its full utilization. Board members may ask questions to clarify the facts of the petitioner's presentation. When the board is satisfied with the material presented by the petitioner, the chair will then ask if there is anyone present online who would like to speak in favor or opposition of the request. Each speaker will be asked to provide their name and address, be sworn in, and then state their comments. Procedurally, the petitioner may request a continuance at any time during the hearing prior to a call for the vote in order to bring in additional documentation or information. The board may also request a continuance to gather additional information or for a further visit to the site. After the conclusion of input from all interested parties, the board will ask a staff person to provide the Department of Planning's report on this matter, if requested by any member of the board, the petitioner, or any individual that is participating online. Additionally, any other information not presented in the previous testimony but pertinent to the request will be noted at this time. Once all speakers have been heard, I will call for a motion to grant or deny with or without conditions, and then the board will vote. At that time, the discussion relating to the petition is concluded and no further input will be permitted. The board will generally make a decision today. 4 members of the board must vote in favor of the petition for it to be approved. So for tonight's meeting, that will require a unanimous vote. If a variance is approved, the petitioner has 6 months to obtain the necessary permits or establish the use, or it will expire. If the board's decision is unfavorable, the petitioner has the right of appeal to the St. Louis County Circuit Court. This appeal must be done within 30 days of the decision. Okay, Travis, are there any questions at this time? It doesn't look like it, so, oh, I'm sorry, Joe?
I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, it usually takes a second or two, so maybe just give us a minute to see.
Okay. And it looks as if there are no questions at this time. So the board will proceed. So at this time, may the first request be read into the record, which will be followed by initial comments by the Department of Planning and a brief slide presentation.
And I believe Kathy's going to read the first request into the record.
Yes, sir. BA 21-20, Glenn M. Travers and Elizabeth, AKA Libby Travers, husband and wife, 785 St. Paul Road, Wildwood, Missouri 63021. Request an exception to the miscellaneous regulations of the zoning ordinance, which states no more than one single-family dwelling can be located on a lot or tract of land at any given time for the purpose of maintaining an existing residence original at 785 St. Paul Road. Locator number 25T440033, Nicholas Destrahan Estate Subdivision, part of Lot 3 and Section 8-44-4, while a new single-family dwelling is constructed. The existing residence, original, with the completion of construction of the new single-family dwelling, would then be converted to an accessory structure, meeting all requirements as specified in Chapter 415.030 Definitions, Accessory Structure. This request is contrary to Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban Residence District Regulations and Chapter 415.380 Miscellaneous Regulations of the City of Wildwood Zoning Ordinance and is located in Ward 6.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And if we could have a presentation at this time, that would be great.
Mr. Sprunger, just before Kathy begins the presentation of the photographs, the Department of Planning would like to introduce into tonight's record regarding this matter the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, Board of Adjustment. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Zoning Ordinance. A file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request and all contents contained therein, including the department's recommendation report. And then finally, all other testimony, presentation materials, photographs, or other items provided as part of tonight's hearing on this particular request. Mr. Chair, with your permission, Kathy will share screen and begin her presentation.
Please do.
Thank you. I'll apologize in advance because the county mapping system was giving me some fits, so the quality isn't great. So I'll just give a better explanation. But the first map, we try and just orientate you to where the subject site is within the city. As you can see, it's highlighted in the lighter blue. The purple line is actually the city boundary. So this is located in the eastern portion of the city along the boundaries with the city of Ellisville and unincorporated St. Louis County. Old State Road as the main arterial kind of cuts through the site up here in the upper left. And then Ridge Road and St. Paul Road come down near the property. And the other main intersection would be Kiefer Creek at St. Paul Road. This is an aerial of the site itself. It is more than 40 acres in size. The majority of the surrounding land use is other large lot single family residences, with the exception of Crown Point Estate subdivision, which is off to the northeast corner and is accessible from Ridge Road up near Old State. And then the Arbor Chase subdivision, which is accessible off of Kiefer Creek and is located to the east of the property. As you can see, there is only one other residence in near proximity with this subject site. This is another aerial showing the topographic layout. The subject site sits on top of the ridge, and you can see is about the only flat area in the entire aerial shown. Again, Crown Point Estates up in the northeast, Arbor Chase to this side, and then other wooded areas and large single family residences around. The subject site is located off of St. Paul Road, which is this main road through the slide. It is not really even 2 lanes in width, so it lacks a center stripe. There's no improved shoulders, no curb and gutter or stormwater treatment besides earth and swales. And then St. Paul Road actually comes off, and that's what's going to the left and out of the slide. And that is the road that is accessible or provides access to the subject site. It's about a quarter to a half mile off of St. Paul Road itself. This is St. Paul Road looking in the other direction, and the access to Petitioner's property is just off the bottom of the slide. This is the St. Paul Road that provides access to the site. As you can see, it's more like 1 lane in width and has even fewer improvements than the main part of St. Paul Road. Again, this length is about a quarter to a half mile to Petitioner's property. St. Paul Road ends into the Petitioner's property. You can see the gates and the wall delineating the entrance into their property and the switch to the asphalt road. The existing residence and the proposed dwelling are both far enough off they can't even be seen from the access point here. This is the only neighbor. This is the one home that I identified in the other aerial photograph, and their property is just to the right prior to entering into the Petitioner's gates. But again, as you can see from the woods, not visible from, neither home is visible to the other. This is the existing home on the property that the Petitioner is proposing to retain and turn into an accessory dwelling once the new home is built. The new home is proposed over here to the left of the slide where the circle drive kind of starts to curve back. The new home would be proposed off of that side. This is the location of the proposed dwelling. There are a number of stakes out that you can kind of see where the home is proposed in the clearing. So there's no tree clearing proposed at all. This is taken near the area where the new dwelling is proposed, just looking back at the existing dwelling, which has a swimming pool located off the back. There's a small fence that you can see around the pool, and then the existing barn. And this is looking back towards the entry. This is the wall that was shown in previous slides with the gate at the Petitioner's entrance. And this is just their driveway. And I'm standing a little bit into the driveway from where the new dwelling is proposed. This is the Petitioner's plans. So again, let's see if I can give you a little bit. This is where the gated entry is as we came in then through the asphalt drive. This is the existing home here off to the right, and the pool and the barn back here. And then this is the proposed location of the new dwelling. And again, the Petitioner's proposal is to modify the existing residence into a pool house at the time. So it would be then in compliance with the city zoning code. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Before we ask the petitioner to come forward, are there any questions from any of the board members of the department? Okay, seeing no questions, then we would like to at this time invite our petitioner forward, so to speak. And is that going to be Mr. Travers?
Good evening. My name is Glenn Travers at 785 St. Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and of course, your name, which you said, and your address, and your relationship to the property, which I think we know, but you should state that, and then you'll need to be sworn in by the court reporter.
Okay, my name is Glenn Travers. I am the owner of 785 St. Paul.
Sorry.
You're unmuted.
Am I? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't see him, so I don't know who I'm looking at. Okay.
Let me try to find it. Hold on, I'm a little green on this. Here I am, sorry.
I
This
see
is
him.
my third Zoom meeting this year, so I'm a little rusty.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Travers, if you could please explain the nature of the request and the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance. And remember, relate this to the character of the property only.
So we're currently living in the house. I've got 5 children, and we're building the new home. And we're going to keep the existing house for a pool house. And nobody will be living in the house. Nobody will be staying at the house, period. So it will not be used for anybody to sleep in or live in. It's going to be, we might do some modifications on the inside to get it more set up for a pool house. But again, the pool's right behind the existing house. So we bought the house about 5 years ago, and the house was built in 1969. And when I bought it, I didn't think it was going to be livable with our family, but it turned out it was in pretty good shape. And we've done some stuff inside, and we wanted to utilize it as a pool house.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Travers. At this time, are there any questions for Mr. Travers from the board? Okay, it doesn't look like there are any questions from the board. So are there any speakers in the audience or virtually that would like to speak in favor or in opposition to the request?
Raise your hand. Let me see you raise your hand.
Mr. Dufour, yes, sir.
Do I need to be sworn?
Yes, sir, that would be great. Your name, address, relationship, and then you'll be sworn.
My name is Skip Dufour. I'm an attorney and I represent the Travers in this request. My office is at 8011 Clayton Road, St. Louis, 63117. And I just wanted to, I don't know if I need to be sworn or not, but what I wanted to add that in terms of the practical difficulties here.
Mr.
Yes.
Dufour, if you'd be kind enough to go ahead and get sworn in, that would be awesome. Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I filed the application on behalf of Glenn and Libby Travers. I'm their attorney. And the presentation that Kathy gave was spot on, 100%. We have reviewed the Department of Planning's report, and we are 100% in agreement with that. And I just wanted to reiterate what we consider the practical difficulties to be. With Glenn's large family, they can continue to live nearby while the new construction goes on, and they can monitor that and not be forced to a double move off the property and then move back into the new home. We're asking that this will be a temporary variance, if you will, and we anticipate that the new construction would be completed within 18 months. And at that point in time, the family will be able to move into the new residence and then modify the original residence so that it qualifies as an accessory structure under the city's code. And that is the full breadth of our request this evening before the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Dufour. We appreciate that. Are there any other questions from the board for either Mr. Dufour or Mr. Travers?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
Bob Nandor. I have a question. So, approving this variance, what assurance do we have that the future actions would be taken by, by approving this variance? And maybe we have to be careful on how we structure the wording of this variance. Maybe there's some comments on that from Mr. Vunich or somebody?
Mr. Dandor,
Yes.
when the Travers begin and complete the construction of the new single-family dwelling, the city's contractual agent, St. Louis County Department of Public Works, will issue a certificate of use, certificate of occupancy and use. That is sent to the city of Wildwood, not the property owner. And before we would release that, thereby allowing them full utilization of the new dwelling, we'll verify that the existing residence has been converted to a pool house.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions? Are there any other written or online comments that came in to the city on this matter?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any written comments. We do have some in attendance at the meeting, so if we could just give them a few seconds. If they would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom or put something in the chat and we will let you in to speak.
We'll wait for just a few seconds and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak.
It's not looking like anyone's raising their hand.
Okay, at that being the case, then if we would like to hear an oral presentation from the department's report, we can have that at this point if anyone desires. Does anyone desire that? Okay, so not seeing any raised hands for that. Does the department have any final comments that they would like to make at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chair, very briefly. Mr. Chair, members of the board, the Department of Planning has provided a report with recommendation to the members. That report contains a favorable recommendation due to the findings of fact contained therein. If the board is inclined to grant the variance, the department would ask that there be a stipulation that the variance be temporary and not exceed 18 months from its effective date. Thank you. And the department, Kathy, Travis, and I are available for any questions or comments regarding the report.
So are there any questions for Director Vunich or Ms. Arnett at this time?
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're going to go ahead and close the proceeding, and we're going to call for a vote. Would someone like to make a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions on this petition?
I will vote to approve with the variance. This is Deborah Coleman. Can you see me?
We
Yes.
can.
Ma'am.
Okay. With the variance of 18 months.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the variance on the condition of, now what was that for the 18 months? Help me with that.
That it would be completed within those 18 months. That's what they had said. That's how long it would take.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve with the condition that it be completed in 18 months. I would like to ask for a second.
Yeah, I'll second. Bob Nander.
So we have a second, and so now we will call for votes. Ms. Coleman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr.
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Balazina, how do you vote? I don't know if the rest of you could hear, but I haven't heard how he voted.
Oh, he's on.
Well, we see your lips moving, but we do not hear your voice.
Okay, hold on a minute.
I'll tell you what, can you give us either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, maybe?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Okay, so that's an
Okay.
approved. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And then Mr. Nandor, how do you vote?
Yes.
And finally, I myself vote yes. Congratulations, Mr. Travers. Your variance has been granted on the condition that you complete your project in 18 months.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to getting a new house and having our family's really excited about it, and so we're all excited, and we got a great little spot here, and we've been in Wildwood for almost 5 years, and we love it.
Well, good luck with your construction, and even more good luck with managing those 5 kids. That I tip my hat to you for trying to do that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think our next petition is BA 22-20. So if Ms. Arnett could read that into the record, that would be great.
Yes, sir. Thank you. BA 22-20, Jonathan Heil, care of Joe Whittemire, 1600 Heritage Landing, St. Charles, Missouri, 63303. Request an exception to the specific yard requirements and exceptions for the purpose of constructing a private stable, which is to be located upon the property addressed as 1289 Christmas Valley Drive, St. Louis County locator number 20V230237, parcel A of section 24-45-3 boundary adjustment. If granted, this variance would thereby authorize a side yard setback distance of 70 feet in lieu of the required 100-foot standard, which is specific to private stables. This request is contrary to the requirements of Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban Residence District Regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance and is located in Ward 2.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, the department would like to have several items entered into the record before the presentation is provided. And Mr. Chair,
Please.
members of the board, thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the board, the department would like to enter into tonight's record regarding this matter the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Zoning Ordinance. A file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request and all contents contained therein, which includes the department's recommendation report. And then finally, any other testimony that is provided tonight as part of this hearing, including any presentation materials, photographs, plot plans, or other items. Mr. Chair, with your permission, Kathy will share a screen and I will narrate the PowerPoint presentation the department's prepared for the board tonight.
Please do.
As Kathy had mentioned, the first slide we provide as part of our presentation is to give you an orientation of the site relative to the surrounding area in a larger scale. The subject site is shown by the turquoise irregular line. Major roadways in the vicinity is Christmas Valley Drive, Orville Road, Shepherd Road, and then far to the west is State Route 109. Moving from a large scale to a smaller scale, this particular slide represents the subject property. The property is defined by, again, the turquoise line. A creek bisects the property in an irregular line, So the house, the existing dwelling, is located on the north half, and then south of the creek is the pasture area, which is the subject of tonight's consideration. The next slide is the same aerial photograph, now with the topographic information overlaid upon it. And as you can see, from the creek heading north or heading in a northerly direction, the topography of the lot changes pretty dramatically, whereas south of the creek, again, the pasture area topography is much more gentle in nature. The next slides represent photographs of the property that were taken this week. The first is from the driveway access off of the private road. This is looking in a westerly direction. The existing single-family dwelling is located up the hill behind the tree line there on the right-hand side of the slide. Again, standing in the driveway, the Hiles mailbox is that white structure there. This is looking to the east, again, along the private street, which is Christmas Valley Drive. So again, at the driveway on Christmas Valley Drive, we'll be heading in a, what I would describe, southwesterly direction. There is a low water crossing of that creek. And again, we're looking in a southwesterly direction. This is the creek, and this is looking in a westerly direction. The white fence defines the pasture area of the subject property, and you can see it in the forefront as well as in the background. And this is looking at the pasture area from the private roadway. This is looking almost due west. So just following the road around the pasture area, we're on the private roadway. Fortunately, the car saw me and didn't run me over. And we're looking again in a westerly direction. Now, a neighboring property, you can see in the lower right-hand corner, the connection between the private roadway and the driveway. This is looking in the opposite direction on Christmas Valley Drive, just where we came from. We're looking now toward the northeast. And this is just a slide that represents the pasture area. You can see that the relatively gentle topography till you get to the edge of the creek. Then it drops, there's the creek, and then you start to rise beyond the tree line up toward the existing single-family dwelling. This particular slide shows the area of the proposed private stable, and this is looking in a northwesterly direction from the private roadway again. And this is just looking in a northeast to northeasterly direction. And again, the pasture area and where the private stable is being proposed. And if you look close enough, you can see 4 stakes with a white tape or some type of demarcation. That is the extent of the stable at its 4 corners. And then again, just looking at a close-up of that 4 corners, that 4 corner area. And this is a good slide to kind of represent the slope off the pasture area down to the creek, then up from the creek toward the existing single-family dwelling. So this is in a northerly direction. And this is just a close-up of those 4 corners. Hopefully you can see a bit of it. Again, it was kind of sunny, and then with the shadows from the tree line. And this is at the edge of the subject property. This is the western boundary. This is looking to the northeast. You can see the existing single-family dwelling in the center of the slide. And this is the edge of the subject property looking at the nearest neighbor. This is the neighbor's driveway that crosses the creek as well and rises up to the single-family dwelling that's on the more on the ridge line, so to speak, than in the low area by the creek. And this is another abutting dwelling. This is across Christmas Valley Drive on the south side, and this is looking in the southerly direction. And again, this property has horses as well, as you can tell by the three rail split fence. Pardon me. This particular request has generated a number of responses from our posting and mailing. There are, in this instance, a total of 7 that have been received. The subject side is the gold star. Those that are opposed to the variance based upon their submittal are shown in the circle, red circle with the white X. And those that submitted comments that are in favor are shown in the green circle with a white check mark. The petitioner provided concept plans for the location, and here's the first of those. Again, you can see the irregular shape of the lot, the topographic characteristics of the property as well, and then the location of the proposed stable. And what I would describe as the southwest corner of the overall site. And then the petitioner's architect also was kind enough to provide a depiction of the stable at the 100-foot setback to reflect what they have identified in their application as concerns about proximity to that slope and creek area. And also there are some architectural elevations of the proposed private stable. And you have on the first page, the north and south elevations, and then on the second page, the west and east elevations. Along with the elevations, there's an interior floor plan, so to speak. It is intended to have 3 stalls plus an open stall area for hay, then a tack room, and then a enclosed storage area for trailer parking or other items, and then an open air porch. To the west, there's a horse paddock, and from the elevations, you can see that's just a shed roof overhang in association with the stable structure. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for the length of the presentation. It was such a pretty day and it looked very nice out there. I guess I took more pictures than I thought. If there are any questions regarding the presentation, Kathy, Travis, and I would be glad to address them at this time.
So are there any questions from the board members?
Thank you for your attention.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
I do have one for Mr. Vunich. Just looking at the documentation that was provided supplementary with this, what exactly is the variance requested?
In our zoning ordinance for the non-urban resident district, it is one of the few districts that has a very specific setback for private stables, and it is 100 feet from any property line, regardless if it abuts a roadway or not. So it is the most restrictive setback we have. The petitioner is requesting a 70-foot distance from that south boundary line in lieu of the required 100 feet.
Oh, okay, so that would be 30 feet.
Yes, a reduction in 30 feet. Thank you. I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, because I was seeing details about 85 feet.
That is the department's recommendation, and I'll go into greater detail later if you would like.
Yeah, we'll get to that, Director
Okay.
Vunich. Yeah, we'll
Thank
get to that. And maybe would it be appropriate to share with all who are attending why it's 100 feet? Why this difference?
Well, the 100-foot distance is a carryover from St. Louis County and has been part of the St. Louis County zoning ordinance at least since 1985, which is when I started with them as a planner. So it's been there now almost 35 years. what it was described to me by the director of planning at that time is that stables have certain characteristics that other accessory structures may not. With the boarding of horses, you have often manure, and that can have an odor or a stench, so to speak. And draws flies. So the thought is to try to center that type of structure due to its characteristics more in the center of a property, or at least 100 feet from any boundary line. Now, most of our equestrian enthusiasts in Wildwood, they take pretty good care of their horses in the stable areas. And the description I provided may not be applicable to all, but again, that's how it was described to me many, many years ago.
Thank you, Director Vunich. If there are no other questions for the department at this time, we would like to invite the petitioner to come forward and ask that you state your name, address, relation to the property, and then be sworn in by the court reporter.
Hi, Jonathan Heil here, 1289 Christmas Valley Drive. And I am the owner and petitioner of this request.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I also have with us today our architect, Joe Wiedemeyer, who is on with me and helped work with Joe and prepared a lot of these documents. That'll be commenting as well.
Okay, very good. So thank you, Mr. Heil. And while we're here, maybe Mr. Is it Wiedemeyer?
Yes, Wiedemeyer.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can go ahead and get sworn in as well, and then you can go ahead and share.
Okay, bear with me here. Trying to get back to my screen.
Yeah, so state your name, your address, your relationship to the property, and then be sworn.
Okay, we ready? My name is Joe Wiedemeyer. I am president of Wiedemeyer Architects. My office is located at 1600 Heritage Landing in St. Charles, Missouri, 63303. I'll just go ahead. I'm here to represent Jonathan and Katie.
Mr. Wiedemeyer, Mr. Wiedemeyer,
Yes,
if
sir.
Ms. Tallman could swear you in, that'd be great. Thank you. And pardon my interruption.
Can't see him now.
Hold on. Am I back?
You are.
Wonderful.
Let me see. Okay, there you are. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Wiedemeyer. I'm here representing Jonathan and Katie Heil. It's been their dream since they purchased the property years ago to house their horses. They own 2 horses. They're currently boarded offsite. They're at that stage now where they're ready to fulfill their dream and build their stable for their horses. They bought this particular property in Wildwood in Christmas Valley due to the nature of the community there and the love for horses. It seems to be a common area for horse lovers, horse owners, and horse boarders. Private. Jonathan and Katie approached me to help them with this endeavor. Without going into any more descriptions on what Mr. Volnitz has already talked about, when I first took a look at this, I first studied how to create a picturesque view. You know, we all know how beautiful Christmas Valley is, and the idea of placing a stable on the pasture there it's going to be very delicate and very carefully done. Jonathan and Katie want this to be a beautiful vista for not only themselves, but for all the other residents who traverse through Christmas Valley Road. So the first task was to determine where the building would go. And my first shot at it was, aside from developing the floor plan to know what size building I was dealing with, and I already submitted the floor plans and elevations for that. So that was our first step. The second step was to place the building in the pasture in what I thought was the most ideal location. And I think we can all agree that that creek would get pretty ferocious. And looking at things, I studied the west end, I studied the east end, and presented a plan showing the stable in the southwest corner, pretty much close to the property lines, adhering to what is normally the standard building setbacks of 30-foot side yard, 50-foot front yard. Once that was done, it was I went into due diligence and studied more on the zoning requirements. And that's when I discovered the 100-foot setback. So we are initially, we just discarded or set aside that original layout or siting. And I came up with a plan where I did on the computer, I did the 100-foot offset on the CAD drawing for the site. And it became obvious that there is very limited locations on this parcel to place this stable, not only in an aesthetic sense, but in a functional sense. So just briefly, on the north side of the creek where the John and Katie's home are, it's severe slopes. So that was ruled out. On the southern side is the pasture. And with the 100-foot setback, the idea of putting the stable on the eastern end of the pasture was ruled out with the 100-foot setback rule. If you take another look at the property lines in that location, 100 foot off the north property line combined with the 100-foot setback off the south property line gives us maybe 1 foot of actual land area to get a building in. That was discarded. Moving over to the western end, the 100 foot put the building encroaching into the natural creek bed and tree line. So, after that study, I realized that well, first of all, I just want everyone to understand that Jonathan and Katie and myself, we want a picturesque setting. This is a once in a lifetime thing. It's going to affect the residents. John and Katie are making a substantial investment in this. It's their dream. And we just want to do it right. So I went to them and said, really guys, the way to do this is to just apply for the variance and see where this thing, if we can get a reasonable building pad approved, knowing that we would need a variance. If we were forced to, or if we were put in a situation where we would have to adhere to the 100-foot setback, the stable would actually be in the sloped area of the creek, maybe 2 feet away from the pretty big tree right there. And of course, the tree line, the limbs and all that. So I went out there with some stakes and I kind of, walked around and saw how we could get this in there. And realized that if you look or if you refer to the illustrations that I provided, the side illustrations, you'll see just sort of a path. It looks like a path that goes around the pasture. And in the first one, where we adhere to the 100-foot setback, the path is condensed. In other words, back and forth like this. By pulling that structure away from the creek bed, not only do we get away from what I believe is a practical difficulty or hardship, we we never want, well, first of all, we just get out, we get ourselves into a situation where the construction is much more feasible. I believe the actual siting will create a more picturesque setting for Christmas Valley. And functionally, we can get a small, a narrow, hopefully a reasonably sized walk path between the stable proper and the creek bed. So that's why we've made the application for or the petition for the variance request. I'm aware that I became aware that the residents, some of the resident to the west neighbor, has some concerns about the siting of the property. And we, Jonathan and I, both spoke with those residents. They are, they voiced their concerns, and we've tried to adjust them on the initial layout where it was in the extreme southwestern corner. That location, which we discarded, would have impacted the neighbor to the west incredibly. And so we relaxed and we adhered the building to the 100-foot setback requirement on that particular property line. That would be the western property line. And then we saw what we could do there. And then, so we didn't ask for any sort of variance toward that side, but toward the Christmas Valley Road side, which would be the southern property line, I requested a 30-foot buffer or adjustment, so that would give us enough area where we can set that building in there and work with our sight lines and our vistas to make sure that when this thing goes in there, that everyone is breathless and agrees that it's going to be a picturesque sighting. I can answer any specific questions anyone has. I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Wiedemeyer. Are there any questions at this time for Mr. Wiedemeyer?
Mr. Chair, I would just ask if Mr. Heil would like to add anything to Mr. Wiedemeyer's presentation.
Joe represented our point of view accurately, perfectly. Nothing else to add.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Wiedemeyer.
I got one more point. I understand that I did read the staff report, and I did see the 85-foot recommendation for approval. We could probably get it in there at 85 foot, but again, the task of getting this thing to set in there just correctly requires, well, it's going to require some finesse. And I asked for the 70-foot setback or 30-foot allowance or adjustment to give us that little bit of wiggle room, so that in my studies, if I rotate the building off of that 100-foot western setback, I may be able to get just enhance the perspectives of that stable sitting on that pasture and the view from the west as well as the east. So while I'm aware of the 85-foot recommendation for approval, John and Katie have and I both actually request that we stay with our 70-foot. I can assure you that if it ends up being 86 foot, I'm sorry, our 72-foot, we will not exceed the 70-foot setback. I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to get this thing sitting in there very nicely with that 70-foot setback. If the board feels uncomfortable with the 85-foot setback, I would basically ask for a continuance. But basically my point is that we would like to have that 70-foot setback.
Okay, are there any questions from the board members?
Yeah, one question from Mr. Nandor. So, sir, you had spoken to one of the neighboring residents, and they were fine with the plan as you've submitted. Were they also fine with the 100-foot plan that for, I think it's in a different direction from their property? Is that true?
I can't speak to that. It was a brief meeting with the neighbor to the west. And actually it was the day I was out there setting those stakes. And
Joe can address that too. This is Jonathan High, Mr. Nader. I spoke with Mark and Terry, my neighbors to the west, and shared them some of the initial plans and walked through a lot of walk them through everything that Joe has shared with the group today, and the locations, and mentioned this. And in that initial information sharing meeting, Mark and Terry did voice their opposition to the 70-foot setback, and I think we'll probably hear from them later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Coleman.
Oops. Yes, as part of a possible resolution, is there a possibility to shrinking the building down a little bit, since it's only for 2 horses? There are a lot of different areas. Has that been addressed?
We did look at the different areas, and I think Joe addressed that the west side of the property is the ideal spot for the barn. A smaller barn, I don't know what that solves with, I guess, just to fit in the setback. So there's 2 actual stalls. We want a third on in case we have friends that have horses. If we ever need a spare stall for another horse to temporarily be on the property, a tack room and a room for storage. To me, a 6 stable or a 6 stall stable is already on the small side. I don't think there's a lot of room to build a smaller stable.
Okay.
For our
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Wiedemeyer.
Yes, I'm going to try to share a screen and show you some of the intricacies of the siding of this structure. Hopefully this works. I'm going to push this here. First of all, I'm going to make this my screen, and then I'm going to share screen. So let's see if I can pull this up. Our stable size, east, west, sight lines. Let's see what this one looks like. Okay, can everyone see this? I don't know if I've shared the screen yet.
We can see it. Thank you.
Can everyone see that? All right, so if you can see my mouse here, this would be the 100-foot setback. And then this would be the 70-foot setback.
Mr. Wiedemeyer, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
But I can see that you're sharing your screen. However, all that I see is just a blank screen.
Okay. Sharing the pause. Okay, stop. Pause. Let me go live. You know what? I think I'm going to abandon this. I guess what I want to say is the point I wanted to make with the illustration. I apologize for not being able to share that screen. Joe may have it in a subsequent drawing that I sent to him. However, if the stable itself was square with the 100-foot setback, that would be one thing. However, with the 70-foot, with the siding that I've got right now, what looks great on paper and I believe is going to look wonderful if implemented, the building is actually rotated slightly And it's off of, let's say, the 80-foot line, or let's say it's about 81-foot line, where if I could just turn the building slightly so that the southeastern corner encroaches on, to the 7-foot point line. The whole entire building or the mass of the entire structure won't be on that 70-foot line. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get it nestled in there just to optimize all the sight lines. I hope I tried to explain that enough.
Yeah, I think if I understand what you're saying, Mr. Wiedemeyer, you basically have the corner of the structure that would, I guess, be in that, inside that setback, the 100-foot setback, not the entire building.
Yes, the corner would touch the 70-foot line, and then the building would go back on an angle back to, toward the creek bed. That would give us about, it would give us a relaxed path, walking path between the creek bed, the tree limbs, and the stable proper on the creek bed side.
Okay, I have a question actually for either Mr. Wiedemeyer or maybe even Mr. Heil. So your neighbor, Mark and Terry Stecker, they had provided to the city, I believe, some other alternative locations for the structure that would meet the 100-foot setback. I think they provided, I don't know, 4 or 5 different possible options. And, clearly the city wants to try to maintain that 100-foot setback for obvious reasons. So did you take a look at those suggestions, and and if you did, what were your conclusions?
After our initial meeting with Mark, where I laid out my plans and explained why we chose this position, I have not spoken him directly with this. Mark did not share with me the alternative locations that apparently he shared with you. I'm not aware.
Okay, yes, Mr. Wiedemeyer?
Nor did I see those exhibits either. I have not seen that information.
Okay, so it's safe to say that Mr. Heil and Mr. Wiedemeyer, you haven't seen the recommendations from your neighbor to the west on other potential locations for the structure that would be in compliance with the 100-foot setback. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm aware of my property, and I've worked with Joe to look at multiple other locations, so I could have a visual. There's about 2.5, 3 acres down there, and if he's picked out 5 spots, I could guess approximately where they would be. It's not that large of a piece of property, large enough for several horses, but no, I did not have that direct conversation with Mark.
Okay, so I think I'm going to ask Director Vunich, have you seen those suggestions and have you reviewed them at all, or not yet?
Mr. Chair, what I would suggest is maybe complete the questioning of the petitioner and petitioner's representative, and then bring in the neighbor so he can explain them, and then let him provide the logic behind the alternative locations, and then we can move on from there. And then I could be glad to answer your question.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Vunich. Yeah, that would be fine. Okay, are there any other questions then for either Mr. Wiedemeyer or Mr. Heil? Okay, if there are no other questions, then at this time we'll go ahead and open the floor to any speakers who would like to comment on this petition.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Stecker has raised his hand, and I'll be promoting him to panelist. It'll take a few moments.
And Mr. Chair, with your permission, I would ask that Mr. Wiedemeyer and Mr. Heil mute their screens. It's just a matter of making sure we don't get any reverberation. Certainly, if you'll be asked to respond to any comments, you can then unmute. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Wiedemeyer looks like he is muted, and Mr. Heil, I'm assuming he is as well. Okay. So I think our first speaker is Mr. Stecker. If you would give your name and address, relationship to the property under consideration, and then you'll be asked to be sworn in by the court reporter.
Certainly. There you go. Thank you. My name is Mark Stecker. I am the resident at 1291 Christmas Valley Drive, the property located to the west of the subject property. If you would like me to swear in.
Please.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the board, thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak on this topic tonight. Yes, it is true that Mr. Heil and Mr. Wiedemeyer, both I've spoken with. Your statement about multiple positions for the barn at 100-foot offset are inaccurate. What I provided to you all was an attempt to show that if the city of Wildwood were willing to allow an exception to the setback rule to 7 feet, there were no less than 4 additional locations where a barn might be placed that would have less impact on our property. So essentially what I did is I took the drawings that were provided publicly on the website, I printed them off, I cut out a template of the barn, and I attempted to lay it in different locations that would adhere to the 70-foot soft setback offset that they had requested versus the 100-foot offset. I understand in looking at the presentation that Joe has presented to the board that a 100-foot offset requirement on all sides of the property really realistically places it in one location, and that's the location of his original drawing. I will tell you as a resident next door, I'm not excited by that, nor am I excited by the 70-foot offset, and here's why. I provided you all a video of driving in the subject property off of Christmas Valley Drive, driving past it and entering our property. I didn't want to try to run that through a share screen or something tonight because it's a massive file and it's just full of the potential for glitches. So I provided it in an opportunity for you to look at ahead of time so you understand, you get a better rationale as to why we're against the idea of this. Second, I put together a PowerPoint of different pictures and different locations because there's more to this than just a placement of a barn in a picturesque location based on property lines and setbacks. One of the main things that I addressed and I sent a letter, I turned into Joe, I sent a letter to put on record that we are in a unique position in that the original 2 owners of this property and their property had an easement agreement. That easement agreement allows our driveway to cross over the corner, the southwestern corner of their property. That original easement agreement became a bone of contention with a previous owner, which we were forced to settle in court. It was then read into record with St. Louis County and recorded as a legal easement across the property. What is not represented in any of his drawings is how that easement and our driveway is impacted by the location of the barn. I have not taken professional measurements. I haven't hired a surveyor. I've just gone out and paced off things. I've tried to stay off of their property inside of their fence line because I don't want to irritate them. I don't want to upset them. But if I pace my driveway off of Christmas Valley Drive to their fence line, I'm about 26 feet to their fence line from Christmas Valley. So the edge of my driveway starts at Christmas Valley. You pace across my driveway to the fence line, it's about 26 feet. So My driveway is about 18 foot wide along that southern border of their property. So when you allow them a 70-foot offset off of that southern border, my driveway is inside of that 70-foot offset. So when you're driving into my driveway, you're not at 70 feet away from their barn. You're more like 50 feet away from their barn at my driveway entrance. And I understand this is not a problem of Wildwood. This is a problem of the property. Been a problem of the property until the barn issue was raised. So there's that issue. The second issue is that the 100-foot offset off the western edge, which we can do nothing about, is not truly represented in his drawings unless you pay attention to the fact that their fence line moves along the edge of their property. Their fence line is currently along the western edge of their property. It's offset to reflect whatever the vision was of the previous owner of how they felt that fence line should look. So in moving the fence line up, when you enter our property, even if they don't move their barn within the 100-foot or wherever they locate their barn, the fence line is going to be at the easement line coming into the driveway and then breaking off as you come and wrap around the western edge. So it's going to look, in my eyes and in my wife's eyes, like when you come up that driveway, when you come up Christmas Valley Drive and you're approaching our driveway and you see that picturesque barn located in that nice pasture, the road that comes off of the side of Christmas Valley there, which is currently the entrance to my driveway, is going to look like an entrance to their barn. And part of that is also in the fact, in my eyes, is that they have created the presentation of that barn so that when we discussed it with Mr. Heil, the best view of the barn is from the western face. The side with the paddock and the picturesque overhang where the stalls are and all that stuff is on the western side on our property. So naturally, if someone's driving up Christmas Valley and shanties off to the right in our driveway, not knowing that it's our driveway, they're going to arrive at a view looking to their right directly at the western face, which they're claiming to be the best view of the barn off of our driveway. So that's concerning to us. So again, what I did is I took the information that they provided, took their drawings, cut their barn out, and tried to show you that if the city of Wildwood is going to bend the rules, they need to consider other locations instead of being dead set that this is the one spot where the barn works. Because that pasture is long enough and wide enough, based on the pictures that I've shown you and putting it out to scale and putting it on the same size drawing, that if you grant them a 70-foot offset from Christmas Valley Drive, it's not necessary that it has to sit on that southwestern corner closest to our property.
Thank you, Mr. Stecker. By chance, do you have those diagrams or pictures that you sent to the city? Would you be able to share those in any way?
I'm not a professional at this. This is like the fourth time I've done the Zoom, so I can certainly try, but I can't promise you that it's going to work. So if somebody wants to tutor me real quick on how I pull my file open and then share screen it, I'll give it a shot.
I can tutor him, or I can open the PowerPoint slides that he provided, if you prefer.
Well, that would be great. I think that would be helpful, so at least everybody's on the same page in terms of what Mr. Stecker is referring to.
Give me just a minute here to pull it up.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you, Kathy.
so everyone is clear, Kathy will share her screen and Mr. Stecker will narrate.
Almost there. Hang on.
Well, we know that this is important to Mr. Heil and Mr. Stecker, so we'll be We'll be patient. We'll be patient.
Okay, this first picture is standing on our driveway looking kind of east, northeast towards the subject property. You see the white fence that's located there in the foreground. In the moving of things and the addition of the barn down there, that white fence actually comes out, not in a straight line, but it's a bit of a diagonal line to the tree closest to the right. It should be within a foot of the base of that tree is where their property line runs. And it runs southwest from that point across the driveway. There's a different view. If you see in the background where the final post is before it drops off into the creek, Mr. Wiedemeyer has indicated with some temporary stakes and flags out there that the farthest end where that fence is would move over several feet and then advance into the foreground towards the base of that tree where I have the red arrow coming again towards me in the foreground and then bending off to the east. Here's some different perspectives. You can see how far offset where their trailer is sitting kind of in the direction of where they're talking about setting their barn. And then another one where you're looking directly across the pasture itself from our driveway. This is another picture where that same fence is brought towards our driveway within whatever the distance is. There's no indication of where the easement actually falls in the foreground of that picture or on his drawings. I know that by the legal easement, there's a 3-foot path on both the north and south side of the driveway where it crosses their property that they can't impinge on. And I'm assuming that they're going to put their fence relatively close to that, but still try to maintain that arc shape that you see in their original drawings. So it's that also gives them some of the space that he talks about with his riding path, so to speak. Okay. Here's two views. The one on the left is closer towards the end of our driveway. And that again is that fence line is going to be pushed up. You can see the corner of the monument that's at the end of our driveway. It's right next to the 1291 CVD. On the right side of that is the same corner of that monument that you're seeing in the left photo. And the fence line again gets pushed up that direction some before they put their barn in place. So you can see that, coming into my driveway, if you're looking straight at where the numbers are on that picture on the right, if you look to the right, you're looking right at the barn within either 75 or 50 feet off of our driveway, right at their barn. Okay. Now I took this picture farther back. Joe did a great job of showing you some of the way that pasture lays. And when I started looking at different locations that they have not given a consideration for in their presentation tonight, you'll see that one lone walnut tree that's there on the right side, inside of the fence. That walnut tree basically sits right alongside where most of the different ways you could turn that barn and put that barn in a location that's up out of the floodplain area in a high-rise area that's still flat enough that they're not worrying about the toe of the hill when they make a placement of the barn. Now, I'm not an architect, so aesthetics of layout to the house and all of these other things, that's not what's in my consideration. In my consideration is that if you're going to present to somebody options based on a variance of the setback rule, why would we consider a single option when there's more than one? And it seems to me, it was presented to my wife and I as if this was the only option. And I disagree with that. So if you're going to request the variance setback request, if you're going to make a request, maybe think about the other alternative locations, because once this is set in stone, if I understand it correctly, if the board says no to a 70-foot variance, then it's no permanently unless it's appealed and won in an appeal. And, you know, I'm not saying I don't want them to have a barn. All I'm saying is that I feel like it's creating a detrimental effect to my property in putting it where they would like to put it. Now, that's both in the 70-foot offset and the 100-foot offset as far as I'm concerned. I know that they're going to build a beautiful barn. I know that their intentions are great. I know that the properties in the area allow for barns. And if they want to put it on a 100 by 100-foot offset, I have no say in that. They can do that. That's perfectly legal. But there are questions and issues at hand that go beyond that. You know, what if the Hiles decide that they no longer want horses, or that they want to move and somebody else moves in and I'm still living next door and they don't maintain that barn? That's going to have an even further detrimental effect on the value of my property. My wife and I have lived here since 2001. We have invested our heart and soul into this location. We've made continual improvements on the property, and it just seems like this would potentially be a step in the wrong direction for us. So that's I believe, yeah, there's different views there of their field as well. Another angle of the walnut tree, and then another angle looking from the Christmas Valley back towards that walnut tree from a different direction. And then this is from as Joe had taken that picture as well, very similar to that, where you're looking directly west from Christmas Valley across their pasture. And there's a nice width of land there. If you can picture a barn, you can picture it anywhere along that 70-foot access, potentially in that field. Yeah, one more time, this is where they're proposing their barn, as best I can tell, based on where Joe has placed his stakes, that it's going to sit kind of in that location, and you can see where it is compared to our driveway. It is due north off the entrance of our driveway. So that's where we have an issue.
So, Mr. Stecker, I think the documentation that I received had some of those photographs. Thank you for that. But it also had, you know, a layout of the property and suggested alternative locations for the barn based on, you know.
Yeah, that was not in the PowerPoint itself. There you are. There it is. There's one of those. So you can see what I did essentially, as I described before. I just took their drawings. I made multiple copies, and I cut out the shape of their barn to show that you can place that barn in multiple locations. And again, aesthetics apart from what they're after there, physically, if you allowed the 70-foot setback, they can put their barn in a multitude of places, and they're considering one, the one that has the most impact, I think, on my property. Again, I'm not against the idea of a barn. I'm just against the idea that we changed the rules that the founders of St. Louis County or Wildwood agreed with on the idea of a 100-foot setback for barns, specifically for odor and things like that. And the best presentation that they can put forward is the one that impacts me the most. So again, that's why we take umbrage with the way the package has been presented.
So, Mr. Stecker, are you saying that you're not necessarily opposed to the 70-foot setback, but rather the location of the barn if there was a 70-foot setback?
No, sir. What I'm saying is, if we're going to change the rules, then there should be consideration of alternate locations, and they're not giving. They don't appear to show the intent for any alternate locations based on a 70-foot offset. They're giving one option. And for me, it impacts me the most that it's the only option they're giving. If I'm giving my druthers, I say no to anything. I don't want any barn down there because specifically it's located. If you look at the way that you have a good view here, if you look from above here, lower left-hand corner, you can see their property line. You can see my driveway crossing the corner of that southwest corner of their property. So now you've got the piece up there. You can't see it. It's underneath of the bar, the toolbar there.
Yeah, I think we can see it.
Yeah. So again, allowing that, even having the 100-foot property line offset is not true for me. And again, it's not your fault. It's the way the property lays out. Because even at 100-foot, I'm inside the 100-foot as a resident. Because my property crosses that area, because my easement, and it's not my property, I apologize. My driveway and crosses their property. So no matter what, I'm going to be inside of 100-foot if they build their barn. Whether you don't allow an offset variance or you do allow an offset variance, I'm inside the 100 feet, and there's nothing that I can do about that. I'm landlocked. I'm stuck.
Okay, so just to be clear, Mr. Stacker, in each of the diagrams that we're looking at now, each of the ones that you provided as alternatives, those are all alternatives based on a 70-foot setback. Is that correct? Because I can't quite read it.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And a question then for Mr. Wiedemeyer or Mr. Heil. Are you, I think I asked you earlier if you saw these diagrams. I just want to make sure that we all understand what has been seen and what hasn't been seen. So have you or have you not seen those particular diagrams or as alternatives?
I have not seen the alternative diagrams that Mark apparently is sharing with you and the rest of the board. Looking at them tonight, and these alternatives that he's laid out based on the 70-foot back setback tonight is the first time that I'm hearing about them.
Mr. Wiedemeyer.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I have not seen those either. That's the first time I ever saw the cut and paste of the barn configuration moved along that 70-foot access somewhere along that field. I can tell you that I did that same exercise myself. I did, if you remember during my initial discussion or narrative, I talked about the east location, I talked about the west location. The east is just so narrow to even with the 70-foot setback at that location, we're in the creek bed, and that is the lower portion of the overall property, and the actual topography drops off in it's almost a serpentine line that goes along the creek bed, the natural creek bed as I describe it. And I did look at all those, and I don't know that getting rid of that lone tree to put the barn there is going to create the best view for anyone. Frankly, it may keep the neighbor to the west happy because the building won't be, the stable won't be in close proximity or within 100 foot of his property line. But in the best interest of the Hiles and the investment they're making on their property and their interest in Christmas Valley and their investment, you know, the logic brought me to, first of all, within the 100-foot setback rule. Second of all, asking for that to be slightly relaxed so that we could get that site and finesse the actual location or the actual orientation of the stable at that location. I believe that that is the best location on that, in that pasture for the vistas coming from both the west and from the east.
that's a point where we would just have to agree to disagree. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
I
Okay.
guess, Mark, I'd like to hear from you when you think you shared that with me.
I did not. It's not my job to share alternatives with you on the location of your barn.
I think that was the question of
That's all I've done, is I'm just trying to defend the rule of 100-foot offset and show that if the city of Wildwood is going to consider another alternative based on a relaxing of the rules, there are other alternate locations that you should explore. And none of those have been presented to me, my wife, or the board this evening. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stecker.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a little hard because Mr. Heil hasn't had really the opportunity to review, these suggestions or recommendations from Mr. Stecker. And I know, Mr. Wiedemeyer, you have considered those other options, feel like they're less than desirable, but we are in a situation where you are asking for a variance. And I think what's interesting here is you actually could build the barn within the 100-foot setback. You could do it, but you feel like it's less than desirable. So when we're talking about what's less than desirable, I think we do need to consider everybody's perspective on what's less than desirable. So anyway, I'll invite other board members to chime in here and ask questions or make comments on this, because we're trying to do what's best for everybody, and these are always hard calls to make. So I invite the other.
Yeah, Mr. Vunich or Kathy, do you have, can you just refresh us on a sketch of where the placement and the variance outline is? I've heard a lot of discussion about the structure being rotated this way and that way, and in most of these presentations, we have a nice dotted line of here's where the structure is, here's where it encroaches the variance. I'm hearing, less than full encroachment, some things like that, that maybe that would be helpful to kind of get back to what are we being asked to approve?
Mr. Nandor, Mr. Wiedemeyer is sharing his screen now, and this is the requested location of the private stable. So as you can see in that, the structure in the southeast corner, it's pivoted on that 70-foot setback. That's the request tonight, and then is angled slightly so it decreases, but fully a half of the structure is within the 100-foot setback as shown.
So can you circle around which part of the structure is out of compliance?
You can hear me. This would be the 100-foot setback.
Okay.
And then this would be the 75-foot setback. I'm sorry, 70-foot setback. And then somewhere in here would be the 85-foot setback, which would push this back. This is the critical location here for the tree branches. This is a mature tree here. It's actually bigger than that graphic. And then the actual slope of the creek bed comes through here like this. So this dashed line here is an indication of where the steps are. So that building would actually, this corner of the structure in a 100-foot setback, strict interpretation or strict compliance, that corner of the floor would be approximately 5 foot out of the ground. And this floods. It's not an actual flood designated area there. It's not that. It's just that the water in this creek is ferocious. It goes over I was told that it comes up to the bank. Well, anyways, the bank is here. And I was told that at times it does actually go over the neighbor to the west's bridge going up to his home.
Okay, and then the driveway is that the neighbor is discussing is right to the bottom of the photo there, right? Is that?
Yes, the 100-foot line from the neighbor's property is, I put a scale to it. It's roughly 5 foot. The neighbor placed these granite monuments on either side of his driveway entrance. The telephone pole in the photographs is right here. So as you drive by, this is dense vegetation along here. It opens up. There's some vistas into the pasture along Christmas Valley. I'm sure you've probably all been through there. But yes, indeed, this is the driveway to the neighbor's home. And the easement, from what I understand now, originally, I believe, this line here. But now I understand that it's 3 foot off the actual driveway. I'm not sure, but that's just my understanding. This is the area where the neighbor's driveway transverses onto the Hiles property. And then if I zoom out, you'll see I developed some sight lines from the telephone pole up to the to the neighbor's home. And then you can get an idea here how the Hiles property runs here to the west and then to the north. And the easement access that was granted for the access for the neighbor's property along this area here.
Thanks, Stuart.
Let me zoom back in. My pan work, my zoom works, my pan doesn't. Okay. Everyone see that okay?
Mr. Dandar, does that answer your question?
Yes, and it does look like I heard the petitioner, the architect, I'm sorry, talking about rotating that structure perhaps as an option to even reduce the variance request more. And I can kind of see that here if you kind of rotated it by, I don't know, maybe 30 degrees, it might remove a lot of that variance, even in that location.
I'm assuming, Mr. Wiedemeyer, when you talk about rotating, you'd be turning it counterclockwise.
That's correct.
Yeah, and then maybe even that would give you a little bit more room to push the or place the building a little bit further away from the drive.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, so you can see, and again, maybe this is the best sight lines and vistas that'll generate when we stand this thing up. Again, when I came in when I requested the petition be filed, I wanted to know what kind of pad I can work with to get this thing to set in there real nice. I understand the neighbors, and believe me, we want to be good neighbors. I know the Hiles. I've spent a good deal of time with them both. We want harmony. We just want, friendly neighbors, and we want to be friendly, or they want to be friendly neighbors. I want to help them achieve the best possible solution here. At 85 foot, 75 foot, at 100 foot. The 100 foot, I do believe actually creates a practical difficulty, especially if I'm still sharing my screen. If I'm in the creek bed with this corner, now I've got to do something to steps up to the porch. In this location, I can do the grading here. There's a access for the horses to come through the barn and this access here. So if we were to adhere to the strict 100-foot setback, this barn door right here would be 3 foot in the air, and I'd have to create a ramp for the horses to get actually out here. So if you see over here at this location where it says 30 foot, resume on this. This is the what do we used to call it? Fudge space here, this 30 foot. If I rotated this corner back to the staff recommendation, or Joe's recommendation for the 80-foot recommendation for approval, yeah, we could get that to work. The building would roughly follow these lines right here.
Yeah, and just to be clear,
I beg your pardon?
yeah, just to be clear, I think what the department's recommendation was maybe an 85-foot setback. Is that right, Mr. Boone?
Yes, sir. The department has recommended an 85-foot setback. Principally, it looked at the creek area more so than the driveway of the neighbor. Given what we're learning about Cox Creek and the entirety of the watershed, we're trying to be more cautious where structures are placed along the main channel as well as any of the fingers or ephemeral drainage ways. So again, the department's recommendation is 85 feet, still a variance, but of a lesser amount. And to the petitioner and petitioner's representative, I think I owe an explanation. Typically, we don't send out the commentaries that we receive from adjoining neighbors, regardless if they're positive or negative. In this particular instance, I could see where it would have been helpful, and I do apologize. Certainly, if you would like to study those, the board can offer a postponement, give you the next 3+ weeks to review those and prepare a response. And from that perspective, again, we apologize for the error on our part.
Joe, I don't think there was an error, and I'm not asking for an apology. My question was, I was forthright with Mark with sharing my plans well ahead of any of this. And I was a little bit surprised that he went to the lengths to identify alternative spots and not return the favor in kind. And when we brought it up before with Arnie or Mr. Springer, I was just answering his question. So yeah, no apology needed.
Well, Mr. Howe, you're being kind, but after 25 years, I ought to be able to figure some of this out a little better than I did. So like I said, I don't want to delay you, but certainly I just want you to know that hopefully I won't make that mistake again.
Well, and I think at this too, Mr. Heil hasn't had the opportunity to review the suggestions by Mr. Stecker. Mr. Wiedemeyer has been putting some more thought here almost on the fly about how he might be able to rotate the building. I mean, it really does seem like, but I mean, the board will do what you want us to do. I mean, we can vote on this, but it almost seems like what Director Vunich is maybe gently putting on the table here, and I think it's wise counsel is, maybe we should back away from the table, we being maybe y'all, and think through some of these suggested alternatives, and Mr. Wiedemeyer, coming up with some alternative ideas, and sitting down at the table and maybe the three of you or whatever can come up with something that would be satisfactory to all three of you and yet works well for the city. That would always be kind of the best scenario if it can happen. However, having said that, it is your call. You can decide what you want to do in terms of asking the board to vote on this or asking for a postponement so that you can consider all the things that have been talked about tonight?
Certainly. I guess what I would say is I do know the property well enough, and we did look at lots of alternative sites before this. I understand Mark's objection, and Mark's objection is significantly less, about 30 feet, and more about building a barn on the west side of the property. With all respect to Mark, given the variance, or even without the variance, and having to modify some property, it is my right to play within the rules, either 70 feet if I'm given the variance, or the 100 feet, the standard of where I would like to place that barn. And I've identified the location for the barn, and it is on the west side of the property. So
Mr.
my
Stacker?
suggestion,
I'm sorry, Mr. Heil, are you finished, or would you like to add a little more to?
I was going to suggest that we vote on the 85-foot variance that was recommended, but we'll certainly yield the floor to any more comment.
Mr. Stecker, I know you had your hand raised.
Certainly. Without sounding abrasive, Jonathan did present their drawings to us ahead of time. And at that informal discussion, we told him that if he were to request a variance, we would certainly be in opposition to that. So there is no secret to that. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said previously. It's not my job to offer up the alternatives. All I'm trying to do is show to the board that if you're going to request an alternative to the rules, that there were other options that they can consider. Now, they have told us that they have considered those other options, and they have found that those other options do not fit what they consider to be a reasonable location. So I understand that. I have my position, they have their position. As I said, if they played within the rules of 100 by 100, they didn't even have to raise a hand to say anything about building their barn. They're perfectly within their rights to build it in that 100 by 100 offset. And I would have to just live with that location. No matter what your ruling is tonight, I will live with whatever that location is. I am just trying to express to the city that when we change the rules for something, it has an impact on everybody. So there is the potential that other people are going to see this ruling as a chance for them to change locations for positions of barns on their property. And we have now changed the rules from a 100-foot rule to potentially a 70-foot rule, depending on how rulings run. So it's a, I don't want to call it a precedent, but it is in this area, it's going to be a precedent. Because if you look at the other properties in the area, we don't have anybody that's outside of that 100-foot offset. And I'm not trying to be abrasive. I'm just saying whatever your ruling is going to be, and we're going to be fine with that. But we just wanted you to understand that it has an impact on neighbors. And I'm certain, based on the drawings I've seen, it's going to be a fabulous barn. But then, you know, I'll drag something that's completely out of the subject. Solar arrays. I have a solar array in my front yard. I played by every rule laid out there by St. Louis County and Wildwood. And now the rules have changed for people doing solar, in that when the solar array has reached its useful expectancy, that solar array has to be discarded of in a reasonable and respectable manner. I go back to the sort of the same thing. The Hiles decide to move on. They sell their property to somebody who doesn't have horses and doesn't desire the barn. The barn falls into decay. That has an impact on all the property around it. It's inside of the original offset agreement rules and regulations that Wildwood has set in place. It's an impact.
Mark,
Okay.
if
Thank you,
it
Mr.
would help,
Stecker.
I will commit to removing the structure in the next 20 years if I leave the property. I have absolutely no plans to leave the property, and I have every intention to keep the barn in perfect order. I will commit to 20 years right now, conditionally, with the variance that I'm asking for here tonight.
I can't enforce that. I mean, that's a great good faith effort, but there's no binding law that says you have to stand to it. So
I think we can add a condition like the first representative that they had to have their home done in 18 months. I'll ask for some clarification, but if we can add a condition or add a note to make that law, make that part of the property, I will sign up for it right here tonight and make that commitment to Mark and the city of Wildwood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heil. Thank you, Mr. Stecker. Mr. Wiedemeyer, I think you wanted to maybe add a comment.
Yes, I do want to add, again, I want to emphasize the 85-foot versus the 70-foot. My recommendation, we petition the Board of Adjustment to allow a 70-foot setback, which would be a 30-foot adjustment. I'm not convinced that I'll need all 70-foot, but I can tell the board that I would like the distance between 85-foot and 70-foot to be able to rotate that building somewhat to get it set I'm talking about dialing it in to get it just right. I know Jonathan spoke about the 85-foot rule. Well, first of all, we're not asking for a 70-foot blanket setback. It's just not an arbitrary 70-foot petition that we're asking for. We're trying to stay within the 100-foot, but we've met the creek bed. And we're trying to just rotate that building off of that creek bed to allow a walk path between the creek bed and the barn proper access for the horses in and out between the creek and the barn. And if the board sees our good in good faith that we will respect that 70-foot granted setback, I'll work out there in the field just to make sure that, you know, definitely we're not going to exceed 70-foot, but it'll be somewhere between 85-foot and 70-foot. If the board is still uncomfortable with the 70-foot, I know Jonathan stated that the 85-foot might work. I'm asking for just a little bit of relaxation, so for everyone's best interest, just to get that thing correctly ended. And if you don't feel comfortable with that tonight, I would ask for a continuance so that we could study and possibly just actually get that thing staked out right where we'd like to have it. And if it's 85-foot, so be it. If it's 73-foot 5 inches, so be it. It's going to be in that, you know, we're arguing over, not arguing, but we're debating over 15 feet.
I think we've said everything from our side that we need to, and I guess at this point, if given the option, I would ask for the vote for the 70-foot variance, knowing that there's only parts of the barn that need to go in that 70 feet, and we all saw the diagrams with the rotation. I think it's really clear. We've been talking about this for well over an hour, what we're asking for. So with, I don't know who calls for the vote, but if you're asking me, I'd like to proceed with asking you to ask for the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Thank you, Mr. Wiedemeyer. Okay, so this all started with opening the floor to any other speakers or individuals who would like to speak in favor or in opposition to the request. Are there any other individuals that would like to speak?
Mr. Chair, we'll just give it a, sorry to interrupt, Joe. There are some more folks in attendance. If they would like to comment on the item, we'll just give them a few moments to raise their hand on Zoom.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And Mr. Wiedemeyer, if you'd be so kind as to go ahead and mute your microphone just in case. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, it doesn't appear as if anyone has raised their hand on Zoom.
Mr. Spranger, I believe no one else wants to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you. We've certainly given ample opportunity for those who did want to speak to do so. Okay, so at this point, are there any other final questions for the petitioners from any of the board members? Okay, hearing none, then would anyone like to hear an oral presentation of the department's report? Okay, hearing no request for that, would the department like to make any final comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I'll do it as briefly as possible. Mr. Chair and members of the board, again, I want to extend my apology to the petitioner and petitioner's representative for not passing on those different scenarios for potential locations in the pasture area. The department has prepared a recommendation report. It does believe that the character of the property justifies a variance. The variance that is being recommended is a 15-foot reduction to the 100-foot distance, not a 30-foot reduction to the 100-foot setback distance. The premise of the support is based on the physical characteristics of the site. And importantly, when the department drove the roadway around the pasture area, it came to the conclusion that the placement of a stable, regardless at 100 feet, 70 feet, or somewhere in between, was going to create a change. And so therefore, it did not look at the view per se, but more, again, the physical characteristics of the site. And that's why it's recommending a variance at 85 feet. Mr. Chair and members of the board, Kathy, Travis, and I are available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
So at this time, are there any final questions for the department?
Mr. Chair, if I could add one corollary. Again, respecting the petitioner's request, he is seeking a 70-foot variance, and I believe that's the vote he is seeking tonight.
That is my understanding as well. Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, we are going to close this proceeding, and it'll be time for us to sorry, my battery is running out. Okay, I would like to hear if there is a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions from any of the members. Well, this is getting hard.
I'll make a motion that we deny the petition as stated.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the request as submitted. Do we have a second?
Deborah Coleman will second that.
So we have a second, and we will now go ahead and vote on this. And the vote, just to be clear, this is a vote to deny the request as submitted. So, Mr. Bolazina, how do you vote?
I vote to deny as requested as well.
Ms. Coleman, how do you vote?
Deny as requested.
Mr. Nandor, how do you vote?
Deny as requested.
And I too am going to vote to deny as requested. I am sorry, but this petition has been denied. Okay, at this time, we will move on to the next petition.
Mr. Chair, while Kathy clears out the screen and adds the other petitioner, I'll go ahead and read the request into the record for her. So bear with me. Board of Adjustment case 2320. Petitioner Bordeaux, 233 North Sampton Road, St. Louis, Missouri, 63122. Request an exception to the floodplain district regulations of the city of Wildwood for the purpose of constructing a single-family dwelling, which would be situated upon the property located at 816 Forby Road, locator number 28W 630212, Bope Estates Re-Subdivision, Track C. If granted, the variance would thereby authorize a floodplain setback distance of 25 feet in lieu of the 50-foot standard, as well as a base floodplain elevation of 0.05 feet in lieu of the 2-foot standard. This request is contrary to the requirements of Chapter 415.070 FP Floodplain District Regulations and Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban District Regulations of the City of Wildwood Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 405.050 Provisions for Flood Hazard Reduction, and Chapter 425050 Standards, Safety Precautions of the City of Wildwood Grading Code. An identical variance was requested at this location and approved by the board in April 2019. The use was not established, therefore the action upon the previous variance request expired. This particular property is located in Ward 6. Mr. Chair, before Kathy begins the presentation, with your permission, the department would like to enter into the record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment. Chapter 415 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Zoning Ordinance. The file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this request, and all contents contained therein, including the department's recommendation report. And then finally, any other testimony provided tonight as part of this hearing, which could include any photographs, plot plans, site plans, presentation materials, or other items. Mr. Chair and members of the board, thank you for allowing me to complete the task.
Thank you, sir. And now we'll have our presentation.
Thank you. Well, if I can get it to advance, we will. Bear with me. Didn't like that one. I love Zoom. Have I mentioned that yet tonight? Let's see. There we go. Okay. Again, just to orientate you all with where this property is located within the city. The property is near the southern boundary with the city of Eureka. It's this light blue piece here. It is located on Forby Road, which is a city maintained road that actually terminates into Camp Wyman, or Wyman Center, at the end of Forby. You can see that it's south of Hidden Valley, that's this white portion up here, and northeast of Six Flags. So even though the quality isn't awesome on the aerial, we get some pretty obvious landmarks surrounding it. This is an aerial of the property itself, Forby Road. Again, the city maintained road is located to the north, and you can see that the property is mostly cleared pasture area with some limited vegetation. This property this aerial shows the topography on the subject site itself. And you can also see of key importance to this request is the floodplain area. So the blue Hatchard lines are the 100-year floodplain, and then the yellow portion is the 500-year. But as you can see from the topo lines, that the property is relatively flat and then slopes uphill to the south. This is taken in front of the property. The subject site is to the right of the slide, and this is Forby Road. Again, another rural road in the city of Wildwood with no shoulders, earthen ditches for stormwater management. And off to the left of the road within this heavily vegetated area is Forby Creek. Now we're just looking the other direction on Forby. This is looking towards its terminus into Wyman Center, and the proper subject site is now to the left of the slide. This is the property directly across the street. You can see it has some historic stone with the entryway into the farm. And again, that's a bridge that goes over Forby Creek up to the adjacent property. This is a view of the site itself looking to the south from Forby Road. Again, as noted in the aerial, it's relatively flat and grassy pasture area. So the next 3 slides just show it from each of the different sides. So this is from the west side looking to the east. Forby Road is on the left, and then the creek is where the heavy woods are. And then this is up near the northern property line looking to the south, and now from the east looking towards the west. The next 2 slides are the plans that the petitioner submitted. The first is with the variance requested, and the second would be its location without the variance. So again, I'll just click those real quick and you can see the change. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the board members for the staff? If not, then at this time, we would like to invite the petitioner, Mr. Bordeaux, to come forward, state your name, your address, your relation to the property, and then when you get done with that, you'll be sworn in by the court reporter.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Quick audio check. I apologize. I'm staying in the country with some satellite internet, and it is not great. So if you can't hear me, I may have to dial in for my cell, but is the audio okay?
Yeah, it's perfect. It sounds fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Robert D. Bordeaux. I live at 233 North Sappington, St. Louis, Missouri, 63122, and I am the owner of 816 Forby Road.
And Courtney, you'll go ahead and swear in Mr. Bordeaux.
Okay, please raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bordeaux, would you please explain the nature of the request and the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance relating to the character of the property only?
Yes, I will. As Joe mentioned, this is a request for reapproval from April of 2019. And after multiple iterations of home plans, it was determined that for the optimal placement of the property, of the home on the property, and keeping the appropriate amount of green space, that we would be in needing of getting closer to the 50-foot setback exception to 25. But just as importantly, the BFE of 24 inches posed a hardship in that the property would then need to be mounded significantly, I think 6.5 to 7 feet in the air, and thus sort of diminishing the appeal and the sort of plain nature of the land and the topography. And also, I believe at that time, there was also a FEMA study in play that was out for public comment about reducing the amount of floodplain into the property, some maybe 20 or 30%. I'm generalizing. And at that time, the board considered that as a mitigating factor as well in granting the approval. The FEMA remapping, to my knowledge, has not yet occurred, but it's still out for public comment, perhaps even slowed by COVID, like all of us. So no changes from the original approval, and simply the pictures that Kathy displayed there with and without the variance is really, I think, the best materials we have to share tonight in terms of the impact.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bordeaux. At this time, are there any questions that any of the board members would have for Mr. Bordeaux? Okay, I don't see any questions, so we will move on and open the floor to any speakers in the audience or out there that would want to speak in favor or opposition to the request.
Mr. Chair, it looks as if there are 0 attendees in attendance.
Okay, well, that answers that question, doesn't it? Are there any requests for a oral presentation from the department? Hearing none of that, would the department like to make any final comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and again, I'll try to be as brief as possible. Mr. Chair and members of the board, there are three key factors that led the department to recommend support of this requested variance. Mr. Bordeaux touched upon one of them. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is revising all of their flood insurance rate maps, and based upon the preliminary copies available to the city of Wildwood, the impact of the floodplain on this particular lot is to be reduced once the maps are approved and adopted. Our City Director of Public Works, Rick Bound, was integral in the decision-making process relative to this request in April 2019 and did provide support of the request based upon him working with the Bordeaux as they went through the iterations of different house plans and location. And then finally, the department does believe that there is a hardship relating to the character of this property, and again is supporting the requested variance, in this case, the reapproval of the previous variance from April 2019. Mr. Chair and members of the board, if there are any questions of Kathy, Travis, or I, we'd be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Are there any questions?
This is Deborah Coleman. I just have one question. It says, just to the left of, I'm looking at the drawing, it says future outbuilding. Is that also is going to be what it in the variant or in the setback?
Ms. Coleman, very good question. And
okay.
The 50-foot setback only relates to a residential building or structure attached to it. And that the same holds true for the base, the 2 feet of what we call freeboard versus not having it. So we really protect residential dwellings and structures attached there too. But in terms of outbuildings, they don't have to meet that same high standard.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Okay, are there any other questions? If not, then we will close the proceeding and we will be taking a vote. I would like to ask if there is a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions this petition.
I'll make a motion.
to-
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Please.
Are you- Okay.
Andrew.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance as requested.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the variances requested. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Bob Nandor.
Thank you, Mr. Nandor. And so we will now take a roll call. Ms. Coleman, how do you vote?
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Nandor, how do you vote?
Approve.
Mr. Bolazina, how do you vote?
I approve.
And I too approve the petition as requested. Congratulations, Mr. Bordeaux. Your petition has been approved.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe, I appreciate your help.
All right, you are welcome, Mr. Bordeaux. Best of luck to your future project there. And with that, I think that
Thank you.
concludes, I think that concludes the items of business that were on the agenda tonight. Thank you all for being patient as we navigated through the evening. And I think that takes care of it. Our next meeting is, I don't know, whenever it is. Kathy, you probably could tell.
October 15th.
October 15th. Very good. Well,
But I don't, as of right now, we have no requests unless Joe knows of any. But we still have a week, so I'll let you know.
all right. Very good. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that very much. And with that, I am going to bid all of you farewell. Thank you again for your time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Have a nice weekend and stay safe.
You too, Mr. Funich.